Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to our third AI Xcelerate webinar. In the first two sessions, you may remember we talked about the fundamentals of AI and how to develop effective prompts. Today, we're turning to something that is essential for the success of AI, which is trust and responsible AI. I'm Stephanie Winet from the International Organization of Employers. And together with Microsoft, we launched AI Xcelerate last July to offer free practical AI training for small and medium-sized enterprises. Our aim is straightforward, to make AI simple, useful, and relevant for business. If you haven't yet taken the AI Fluency course, I really encourage you to do so. And since last month, we have also introduced a new course, AI for SMEs, which goes even deeper into how AI can support concrete business goals. So you'll find the links to both in the chat. Please take those classes. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Allison Harnett, Microsoft's Regional Training Manager for the Americas. And when we talk about responsible AI from an employer's perspective, we're really talking about trust. Trust from employees in the AI tools introduced by the employer, trust from customers using the AI tools in their engagement with a business, and trust from business partners. And in all these cases, that trust depends on AI systems being fair, secure, and transparent. In the IOE Microsoft AI Fluency course, we focus on 6 core principles: accountability, inclusiveness, reliability and safety, fairness, transparency, and privacy and security. But these aren't abstract ideas. They translate into practical steps: protecting data, double-checking AI-generated content, monitoring for bias, and making sure you're aligned with regulations. Responsible AI is also about clarity. People need to understand how systems work, where does the data come from, how is it processed, how are decisions generated. In other words, to ensure these systems are trustworthy and dependable, employers must prioritize strong data governance. A clear, well-documented data architecture where data sources, flows, ownership, and controls are well-defined creates a reliable foundation for AI systems to operate effectively and responsibly. Ultimately, building responsible AI is about putting the right safeguards in place so organizations can innovate with confidence, reducing risk, encouraging adoption, and strengthening their reputation along the way. So with that, let me hand over to Allison Harnett, who will walk us through how organizations can build trust through responsible AI. And as always, please share your questions in the Q&A section and feel free to use the reaction buttons to stay engaged with us. Allison, over to you. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you so much. I love the way that you framed this up. Today, we're going to be talking about what a responsible and inclusive look like in practice, and I'm going to try and not make it so theory-oriented. Since we are translating both in Spanish and French, I'm going to try and pause at the end of each slide so that our translators have a moment to actually translate for our international guests, or actually guests who are using other languages. As we mentioned, this is the third of those 6 webinars. One of the things I really love is that Ashi has very practical sessions, and I dive into some of those more overreaching themes on AI, and hopefully together we can provide a complete picture. To set the stage, I'll outline what we're expected to cover and then also what we're expected to learn today. As mentioned, my name is Allison Harnett. I'm based out of Kansas City, which is in the center of the United States. I love teaching. I've been in the classroom throughout my career. Currently, I'm part of Microsoft Elevate, which helps bring AI skills to educators, NGOs, and government workforce organizations around the world. I'd love to hear where you're joining from. Please enter that in the chat as we're kind of going forward. And please use whatever language you're most comfortable with. As people are entering in the chat, I'd love to tell you just a little bit about what we're planning on doing today. I'm going to start with that personal accountability, and then we'll move into those ethical considerations, and then also finally our responsible AI framework. And I just love seeing all the different places people are putting in the chat. I've identified 4 learning objectives for today. We're going to be looking at various aspects of responsible AI, starting with personal practices and then all expanding out until we discuss an overall framework. Before we really get started, I'd love to get a sense from 1 to 4 on your understanding of the ethics of AI. The goal is by the end of today to try and help explain this. This is just a quick poll. There's no right or wrong answer. I know some people are still adding in where they're from, but just on a sense of 1, not confident at all, to 4, very confident. Tell me how you feel about those ethical issues at the moment. Definitely looks like we have a variety of people. Feel free to continue those answers. I want to start off with what every person needs to know at the very beginning. Right. Before we had AI, we already had some tools to protect ourselves on the internet. If you remember the padlock, it's an icon across most browsers that tell you that the website's secure. Since AI is an emerging technology, not all the protections are standardized across the various different providers. So you are going to need to take a few extra steps in due diligence to protect yourself and your family and your business. When entering information in a generative AI tool, you want to make sure that it's secure and that it doesn't use your information to train its models. For Microsoft, if you sign in with your work or school account, there'll be a green shield, and that's how you know your data is protected. It's slightly different in other tools, and so to truly make sure you understand what's going on, you want to read what's often known as the end user license agreement, commonly called the EULA. It will tell you in very technical details, how your information is used, and you want, pardon me, I'll tell you in very technical details on how the information is used and what privacy configurations exist. If you're ever in doubt, anonymize or obscure the information that you're entering in the tool so that you don't enter in private information. We at Microsoft named our collection of products Copilot because we wanted people to remember that the person is responsible for that final output from all the generative AI systems. AI systems can make mistakes, and it's important to review whatever you get back with a critical lens to make sure it's the information that you wanted. And if the information is not up to par, ask Copilot by telling it exactly how it missed the mark, to tune it over by telling it exactly how it missed the mark. I tend to think of AI as an assistant. And assistants often need regular feedback and their work closely supervised. It's exactly the same here. In addition to checking your outputs, there are some things you can do to help improve your results. Use a well-established framework for creating prompts. If you attended Ashi's series last month, she covered GCSE. It's goal, context, source, and expectation, making sure that those 4 parts are in your prompt to improve the output. Another simple thing is to ask for sources to be cited. So depending on your account, this could happen automatically with Copilot, but you can always include the instructions to include the sources with your, always include in the instructions to include sources with your prompt. Specifically, you can also tell the AI tool to say when it doesn't know or if they can't verify the information instead of making a guess. Most AI tools have something called memory, where you can specifically say what you want in general. So I often have, I have in my memory that sources are cited if it doesn't do it automatically, and for it to specifically say it doesn't know when the information can't be verified. I also have it say in my memory to do output in tables because I understand things best when I see things in tables, a lot easier than other ways. One thing you can think about is AI tools are determining the answer that they're going to provide you based on the probability of what they think you want. So the more information you provided and the more specific you are, the tool is going to be better at increasing its accuracy of that probability of giving you the right answer. I'd love to see a reaction if you've heard of a deep fake, whether it's images, voices, or videos. These are AI-generated content designed to impersonate people without their consent. When fake images, audio, or videos are made to look convincing, they can damage reputations, and I love to see these reactions, and even entire organizations. Deepfakes can manipulate public opinion, especially around elections, making people believe something happened or was said when it never was. Once people start questioning whether they see or hear it real, it becomes harder to know what to believe. That uncertainty damages trust between individuals, communities, and institutions. Deepfakes can be used in scams, identity theft, social engineering attacks. They can mimic voices, faces, or authority figures and trick people into sharing sensitive information. So I want us to play a game. and test our ability to spot a deep fake. When you're done, share your score in the chat. Remember, we're all friends here, and the point is to get better at detecting AI-generated images. Each time you do the quiz, you get different content. So I've done it several times, and my score is different each time. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. But as a reminder, you always, the more time you spend actively looking to see whether or not an image is AI generated, the better off your critical lens is. So let's play a game. When you're done, share the score in the chat for everyone to see. Aldo just got 80%. Excellent. Curious to see other ones. I'm hardly ever at 80%. So I am excited that Jean did that. I'm usually more in the 70 range. Oh, you great people getting 80%. There you go, Ronald. I get 60%. Last time I did this training live, and I got like in the 50s. So I did the real or not quiz at the same time, and it did not go well. So this time I'm not doing that. Wilson gets about what I usually get, that 73%. All right. Can you share a reaction if you need a little bit more time? Ronald, I will say that my daughter regularly gets like 80%. She's just really good at this. Yeah. My daughter often does very well. So I she's 13. So I think partially it's just, we spend a lot of time talking about it. But share a reaction if you need more time to work on this quiz. And I'm not seeing any reactions at the moment. So I'm going to move us. Yeah. So I found a list of spotting AI videos, and I think it's applicable for a lot of AI generated content. When looking at content, especially ones that spark a strong emotional reaction, it's important to slow down and pay attention to the small details. AI generated videos often rely on lower visual quality or heavy compression, which will blur the fine details and make the flaws harder to notice. Extremely short clips can be intentional because they don't give your brain enough time to spot any inconsistencies. The longer you can watch something, the easier it is to see whether or not it actually holds together. Another thing to watch for is whether what you're seeing behaves that way in the real world. Movement that feels weightless, too smooth, or physically impossible can be a sign that the video was generated rather than recorded. Similarly, people, objects, or backgrounds can subtly change, disappear, or reappear from one moment to the next. Even these small shifts in hair patterns, clothing, shadows, lighting can indicate that something's not right. audio can be just as revealing. AI-generated speech can sound overly scripted, emotionally flat, or weirdly generic. You might also notice weird word choices, unusual pronunciation, or a tone that doesn't quite match the situation. Faces are a great giveaway. Eye movement that wouldn't naturally follow, blinking that feels unnatural, or skin surfaces that really look smooth can be synthetic content. Context matters also. Many platforms are requiring that AI-generated videos include labels or watermark. So if something looks questionable and there's no indication on how it's created, pause and verify it before reacting or sharing it. Everyone can do this. And the key takeaway is not to memorize every signal, but build in the habit of stopping, observing, and carefully questioning content, especially before you help it spread. Something everyone can do. All right. Thank you for playing this game. I love that people are still putting answers in the chat. I'm going to move on to just as important as ethics and AI. This is a topic that we could spend lots of time on and we could go very deep. I'm just going to hit the highlights. And here's the real or not quiz again, because it does seem like that is what people are looking for. When we look at how AI gets its information, it consumes a large amount of data and we have told that tool what that information means. The AI makes inferences based on what it was told. Using a simple example, if the AI was only trained on pictures of dogs, when it sees a cat, it might call it a dog because that is the only understanding of four-legged creatures. Rabbits, and all other four-legged creatures. We need to provide it with a large amount of animals so it can correctly understand the image when it's presented. When AI makes errors based off of poor training data, we call that bias. AI is an amazing tool to help you determine if content is accessible and also reformat information so that every user can understand that information presented. This is beyond looking at something like visual disabilities, but also looking at cultural sensitivities, languages, and learning styles. I'm not naturally a visual person, but I know a lot of folks need an image to help underscore the information they're learning, so I try and include them in my presentations. Think also about AI to both create inclusive content, but also make sure that it can access all of the content that you want to create. Very important to think about. I think it's also important to acknowledge that generative AI consumes more resources than traditional computing. That's a real consideration. And part of that responsibility comes with developing and deploying these systems at scale. Well, I can't speak for other technology companies. Microsoft is very intentional about how we design, build, and operate the data centers we own. This includes thinking not just about performance and capability, but also about the impact those data centers have on local communities. Way before the rapid growth of generative AI, Microsoft made public commitments to be carbon negative, water positive, zero waste, and protect more land than we use by 2030. Those commitments have directly influenced how our data centers are built and managed today. As AI has accelerated, it's pushed us to get more creative and more thoughtful, investing in greener technologies and more efficient designs so that we can continue to stay on track to those 2030 sustainability goals while still supporting the demand for AI. One thing that I think is really important for us to consider is that all of us are now in a position to help change history. We've seen this pattern happen before. When new technologies are introduced, parts of the world are often unable to participate, not because the technology isn't powerful, but because access and support wasn't built in from the beginning. Even today, nearly 200 years after Michael Faraday's discovery of electromagnetic induction, a significant portion of the global population still does not have access to electricity. That gap didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't accidental. As we move to a more AI-driven economy, we have an opportunity to learn from that history. With AI, we want to intentionally build structures that allow everyone to participate in the AI economy, rather than trying to fix AI inequalities later. A large part of this success will come from skilling and training people so that they can meaningfully tap into AI's potential, not just consume it, but shape how it's being used. This was such a short introduction to ethics, but I'm curious to see if your understanding has changed. It's that same question we had before. Please feel free to share in the chat if you feel like you understand just a little bit more about the ethics involved in AI at the moment. So I'm not able to see everybody's like before and after as we kind of map it, but it does appear to me that the numbers are a little bit higher. So I do appreciate that. It feels like that we've learned something, which is always great. On to my last section. I want us to move out looking at a broader framework on responsible AI. This is more designed for that corporation level, but I think the broad principles are incredibly important for SMEs also. So AI has the potential to be a truly transformative technology. At the same time, history reminds us that we haven't always gotten it right when rolling out these new inventions. Learning from these moments, Microsoft believes it's essential to be deliberate about how AI is built and applied. That belief led to the creation of the Responsible AI Framework. So, taking that idea forward and recognizing just how powerful AI could become, Microsoft deliberately chose early on to pause and really think deeply about what responsible adoption should look like. AI is not just another productivity tool, it's a technology of consequence. And because of that, our trusted technology group spent a lot of time weighing both the risks and the opportunities on how we could give our internal teams across the company a shared way to navigate those decisions. In 2018, that work resulted in the Microsoft Responsible AI Framework. The goal was to create a common language, something that everybody could look at and understand, that keeps accountability and human judgment at the center as technology evolved. You actually heard about those principles and in our opening. We have two foundational principles, and it's in that foundational course that you can take, that foundational AI. The two foundational principles: transparency and accountability. That is our baseline. We believe that everyone should understand what AI systems are, what they're doing, and what people are ultimately accountable for that AI tool. On top of those foundational principles are four more. Fairness. AI systems should treat all people fairly. Reliability and safety. AI should perform both safe and reliably. Privacy and security. AI systems are secure and respect privacy. Inclusiveness. AI should empower every person and engage everyone, regardless of their background. You've actually seen elements of our training that reflect our responsible AI principles in action. Our April session will be on cybersecurity, and we'll delve into how reliability and safety merge together with those best cybersecurity practices. Ashi and I have both mentioned that green shield and Copilot, so you know your data is protected when you sign in. The human in the loop, I think all of us have, Ashi and I have both done that, is one form of accountability. But we all at Microsoft also designate human teams for each AI solution deploys so that we may meet our responsible AI standards. But sometimes it's harder to observe our principles like fairness, transparency, or inclusiveness. So I want to share a little bit about them. We talked about deepfakes earlier. We're working on ways to help people recognize AI-generated content, including images created by our own system, and especially in areas where deepfakes are a real concern. We are specifically to make sure that our image creation tool is trained on a diverse selection of people. And when we notice a gap, we correct it by purchasing images to train on that represents a better selection of the world's population. We can only do that bias correction if we regularly measure our systems to make sure that people are treated fairly and accountability and fairly and represented accurately. So it's a little behind the scenes, but it still happens. Just as foundational is how we manage is how we implement our principles, because our principles just aren't themselves. So we have a responsible AI standard, which is a living document. It can change with the technology and help us move from theory to practice by outlining specific goals, requirements, and practices that engineering teams need to follow. And then we execute on those standards by doing internal training and testing, and all of our employees have mandatory training on the adoption and responsibility of AI practices. Our developers have separate trainings so that they can develop things responsibly. And each team has responsible AI champs who help scale the implementation of AI within their organization. And then, of course, we have those critical mechanisms for monitoring, reporting, and auditing. So across all of our teams, whether they're research, policy, engineering, they're working on new technologies, there's oversight and communication by all of them, and that all feeds into our Office of Responsible AI. That is a lot, and most people aren't going to do something like that. If you're interested in our approach, I invite you to read our transparency report. You can find specific examples on how we make our decisions, but also talk about tools. And there are some resources in there for your own business so you can talk about your own governance process. I realize Microsoft is a large organization, and so our standards are very robust to reflect that. But I don't want you to feel like this is intimidating, because I feel that every company or SME can do a similar experience. They may not create a full responsible AI standards that is pages long. They may not have a transparency report that they do every year, but they all can make intentional choices. So think about what anyone can do. What is your values? What is your organization values? What matters most when AI is involved? Turn those values into habits. How are you going to verify outputs, protect sensitive information, and watch for bias or accessibility gaps? Then choose the tools and habits that support these values. Pick your products and your settings that align with your priorities. That's the practical definition of moving from theory to practice. Values, behaviors, and tools. I want to introduce a concept called a waterfall chat. And I want you to type your answer, but don't hit enter until I do. This is a great way to have everyone answer all together. I've never done this with a multilingual group, so we're going to do it as an experiment. I think it will work fine. Basically, since everybody answers at the same time, we all have like what's known as a waterfall. My question today is, what's the weather where you are? Oops, wrong slide. What's the weather where you are? For instance, it is cold here. It is 8 degrees Celsius. It is, Pablo says it's cloudy. But hold on, don't answer it. Just type in what your answer is, and then share a reaction if you need a little bit more time, and then we'll all hit enter at the same time. So type in your answer. And if you're ready, on 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Let's see what everyone's outfits. Perfect. Great, guys. Lovely. I see cold and rainy, 36 degrees. It is not 36 degrees where I am. That sounds lovely, sunny. Lovely. Everyone else is going into these nice sunny things, although it's rainy. Couple people rainy, cold. Yes, exactly. Excellent. All right. Do you feel like you need another practice on a waterfall chat? Do we want to do another one just to see? Share a reaction if you feel like you want to do a second practice. Not seeing any other reaction. So I think you guys did actually really great on that one. All right. Sorry, I need to change my screens a little bit. All right. Oh, I do see a couple reactions. Okay. Give me a second. All right. So our next reaction our next one we're going to do is let's go ahead and pick what you ate for breakfast this morning. Or if you haven't eaten breakfast, what you plan to eat for breakfast, or a beverage that you enjoy in the morning. So for instance, it is morning here. It's 9 a.m. And I am enjoying a cup of coffee. All right. So just give us a few moments. Let everybody write. Okay. What sort of beverage are you enjoying this morning? Or what would you be enjoying for breakfast? Something along those lines. All right. And show me a reaction if you need a little bit more time to type it in. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. Rice, coffee, banana, egg and coffee, ginger tea. Lovely. Perfect. All right. Let's try it again. This time, I want something a little bit more substantial. This is what responsible AI practice or principle would you consider most important for your framework? So remember, we had fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. And here there isn't a right or a wrong answer, but I'm very curious to know your thoughts. I think it's important for us to take some time to reflect on what we find valuable and what we might change, so you know that might be different than the 6 that the Microsoft uses. All right. If you could share a reaction if you're still thinking. All right. It sounds like people are done typing. So are we ready for a waterfall on this one? 3, 2, 1. Privacy and security, excellent. Reliability and safety. These are all amazing answers. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for playing along with me. Yeah, data security. Yep. My husband and I were talking this morning about how he needs to do data security with his company to just truly make it the reliability and safety. All great answers. And again, there's no one answer, but it's all something that you want to put together, all, kind of think about what is important to you. All right. From here, I am truly excited to dig into some questions. And so let me open up the Q&A, see what we have. I see no Q&A questions. So feel free to put some questions in Q&A. And I see, does Microsoft have any case studies? This is a great question, Jean, about small or medium companies adopting AI and how they build staff trust. I can't think of any off of the top of my head, but I think the same principles exist. So when you're thinking about building staff trust, you want to like back to when we talked about that how training and skilling is important. You want to make sure that people are comfortable with the tools, people understand what they're doing. So having that baseline skilling experience, however you do that, whether or not it's internal meetings, whether or not it's sending people to trainings, and then also think about in that sense, kind of like where, maybe you're not going to do an office of responsible AI, but you're going to have one person who's going to be your AI champ who can help create policies and help going to those businesses. I don't know if I have any case studies, but I will try and look for case studies and send them on for you guys, because I think that's an excellent question. Aldo do we have a lab for creating agents with external APIs? Yes, we do. So we have several. So the one that I recommend is kind of like the entry level is what's known as Copilot Studio. So there's Copilot Studio Lite. So if you log into Copilot, like, m365.copilot.com, and you log into there, you have kind of the Copilot screen, and there on the side, you can create an agent, and that's what's called Copilot Studio Lite. There's also something called Copilot Studio, which is like a step up from that, which allows you to connect any APIs and also allows you to do different models so that you wouldn't necessarily be tied to the Microsoft models. You can actually use external ones. And then for the more advanced developers, this is not me, there's AI Foundry, which is a product that will collect, you can also connect to like hundreds of different AI models and APIs and truly do what you want to do. There's also a version in GitHub Copilot for developers that can do exactly the same thing. So all great questions. And Aldo has that great follow-up question of what type of licenses are needed to create and develop agents. So this is not my area because I truly do skilling. But if you have a Microsoft license, like if your company uses like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you can log in to the m365.copilot.com, and you have what's known as access to Copilot Chat, which is kind of that basic Copilot. And in there, you can create some agents. They're not very sophisticated agents, but one of the agents that I really love from that, based on that, is you can give that agent a website or a couple of websites. It's not many because it's very basic, but like a website, like if you deal with regulations and you need to get to those exact regulations, you can post that agent to that website and have an agent that just allows you to answer questions back and forth on that agent. And it's very easy when you do create your own agent in that system, and it is just when you have that Office account. You do want to ask it to cite sources. It's one of the things that's one of the tools that doesn't cite sources. So ask it to put in where that regulation is. And then I do see some other questions. Jean, do we have time to continue those questions? Okay, great. All right. Microsoft's environmental justice activities. Does Microsoft also have a program for a just AI transition? Well, I think that's a lot of what my team does, is those skilling things. But we also have an AI for Good lab, and if you haven't looked at that, you can look at some of that stuff. They actually have some not only do they do some humanitarian things, like they'll use AI to count the number of giraffes in Africa and like a particular thing, but they also are actually doing research questions on how AI is changing the economy. So definitely look into that resource. And then for human resources, that potential bias and recruitment. That is a great question about whether or not it has any specific human resources tools. I don't know one at the moment. I know that there's a new agent that I think is available. I don't remember on what tier. That's like the employee self-service agent that I know that is kind of starting with that experience. But yeah, the human resources and recruitment and that sort of experience, so important. I mean, if you've ever paid attention, that the name on a resume can change who gets interviewed and who not sometimes, and something that is truly an interesting thing to kind of look at. And we always want to make sure that the best person does it. So yeah, I don't know of any specific tools at the moment, but that's a great tool to create. Yeah. So that's a really, Stephanie has an awesome question. If AI makes mistakes, does the accountability still lies with the user when the outcome goes unexpectedly? So I think there's two parts in that. First of all, it is on the user to take whatever is in that AI output and to truly make sure that what you see is correct before passing it on. So it's your accountability there. But the other thing to really think about is that you can help sort of train the AI in what works and what doesn't. And there's a couple of ways to do that. First of all, you can actually just write back, that was absolutely incorrect. This is why it's wrong. And then, tell it to reformat it. But there's also, if you're using Copilot, there's like a thumbs up and a thumbs down. And you can specifically put in I put in thumbs down, and I've explained exactly what was wrong and like how it missed the mark, so that then our team can go back and help reformulate the model on that one. So, every AI system that I use, I specifically say that it's not training on my data. So it's specifically not going to learn overall if I say that it missed the mark. But if I do that feedback, then that goes back to the developer so they can do it. So you can kind of help that. Sometimes really just we don't necessarily know where the problem is. And so, if you can help us, that's always helpful to everyone else. So I want to double check the Q&A, make sure people didn't put questions in there, but I do see them in the chat. All right.
Alison, can I also raise a question while other may bring more questions to the chat? I was just wondering, you presented the Microsoft AI governance, which is quite broad and comprehensive. Can we help SMEs also build their own AI governance? And, we can even start small by thinking about how we could draft an AI governance about the recruitment process or about workforce planning, how a company uses AI in the recruitment process, how a company uses AI in the workforce planning, and have an AI governance around that could help SMEs. Would you have other ideas or cases that could be of help for SMEs in very dedicated AI governance schemes?
Yeah, no, I think the other thing to really think about is what you want your company to allow, what tools they're allowed to use and when. So, there's lots of different free tools out there. And, there's cases of, employees who use the free tool and put confidential information in. And so that's probably one of the very first things that I would start, is that when you can use tools and where you can use them and how that's protected, just to make sure that you're not accidentally sending off something important that you really don't want. And especially if it's a tool that uses your information to train it, because then that can go everywhere. So that's probably one of the first things that I would start off with, is what tools you can use and in what circumstances you can use that. Particularly like if you're in healthcare or something like that, you very well may not be able to use tools. You might be able to use like an anonymous version of the tool, depending on where you are, but really doing that research as to, one of the cases I was working with was like a job search agency. And, of course, you don't want to put so-and-so's resume into a tool, but maybe you can put that, this is their background, this is what they have, what sort of jobs might be appropriate for them. So really thinking about kind of that privacy. would be probably the first thing that I would do. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be robust. It really is, start thinking about what things you find important, and then from there move on to the next, to the next step, is just building off of that.
And when you unpacked the 6 principles, I think privacy and security came first. So indeed, that's a very good shout out you just did, Allison, because this is what I saw in the chat. Privacy and security coming first when you asked which of the 6 is the most important to you. So outlining this is quite important.
It tends to be mine, just for those various reasons, and because I personally don't want someone to do that for me, right? I don't want, so I think that's kind of how I always look at anything when things are important. Aldo has a great question. How is data blocking used from like an app or a prompt? And so this is where you really get into those particulars on what tools are free and or are paid. And so Copilot Chat, that free version, you basically will provide it with whatever data and context it needs. But if you move into the M365 Copilot license, and there is a cost per user for that, when you do that, then it has access to what we call your work IQ. And I'm not a salesperson, so I'm going to say this poorly, but essentially it has access to all the documents that you have access to. So that if someone shared with you a Word document, then that Copilot has access to those Word documents, and it can infer things from it. And like same thing with the Teams chats and stuff like that. So like, if someone sent, Jean, if you sent me a Teams chat asking me to revise sales numbers, I can then use Copilot. Copilot will take that into account in helping me, with whatever I'm formulating. And the only way that works is that if you're very particular on how you share information. So Jean would, when she's sharing me sales numbers, she would share specifically so that only I get those sales numbers and not someone in finance or something like that, because we want to make sure that only the people who need that information can do it. And so when you do that, then the data is kind of blocked. But you have to truly make sure that you're making sure that level is. And so, yeah. So my guess, Aldo, is that you have that what we would call that Copilot chat level. And so that it's based on that everybody gets it. It's free. It comes with like your Word. And then there's an additional one for the M365 Copilot, which uses all of your documents. Is my guess, but it's not necessarily based on usage. Again, not sales. My understanding is it's based on the number of people. Like you would say that I'm going to enable M365 Copilot Chat for X number of users, and then they have access to it. Yeah, and how can small sales use AI to grow their businesses? This is a question I am going to leave for the next session as a teaser. Ashi has an amazing session teed up for you where she actually starts as if you are, if you saw her last month, she used that GrowMart example with that small scale neighborhood market. And she actually kind of takes you through the scenario of if you are the executive at GrowMart all the way to like if you are like finance in GrowMart and what sort of things you can do. So I'm going to let, I am going to let Ashi share that for you next month, March 26th, if I remember the date on my correctly. So I would definitely highlight going to that one.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison. I will take the opportunity of this transition to potentially now also close our session. Allison, this has been really very much informative and instructive. You have on the screen the contact details of Allison if you'd like to reach out. Thank you for reminding us about the end user license agreement, EULA, which you invited us all to read to make sure that our data are protected and that we know what we're sharing and not. For recalling, the prompting and how a prompt can be of use and efficient, as we learned in the second session: goal, context, source, expectation, and make sure that we ask for sources to our AI friend. And also tell our friend to say, I don't know. I very much like this, Allison, to ask him, well, tell me if you don't know, when the information cannot be verified. And this will definitely help a lot of output to be correct. And you also enlightened us on the deep fakes, and the small game we did was quite instructive. I'm impressed by the ones that did reach the 80%. I didn't. So congrats to all of you who reached 80%. But the tech is developing so fast, the pace is going so fast. And I think the clues that you gave us, we need to be very attentive to that. And because it's moving so fast, we will have, as human beings, we will have to be much more attentive to those clues. So skilling, training on how to use AI. You said 1.2 billion users today. This number will definitely grow. So we really need to make sure that we're all upskilled and reskilled. So to all the participants, thank you for joining. Please make sure you join our next session. We're midway through our series. This was the third one out of 6. The next one is on the March 26th. It's on your screen, March 26th, leveraging AI for growth. Thank you again, Allison, for joining us today, and we look forward to the next session in March. And thank you all, and have a great evening and day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.